When she looked at me and said, "We need to try living separately for 7 days," it hit me like a freight train. We had been married for 5 years, and out of nowhere she wanted a trial separation. Not because I cheated, not because of some huge blow-up, but because she said she needed space to reassess our relationship. When she first floated this little experiment, I kept my face completely blank, even though I could feel anger boiling up inside me. She went on to explain that her recently divorced friend, Brianna, had suggested it as a healthy exercise to gain perspective. According to Jessica, we would still be married, but we would live separate lives for exactly 1 week so that we could appreciate each other more. I was not born yesterday. I knew this was not about appreciation. It was a test, and I had no intention of failing it by begging, chasing her, or acting weak. So I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "If that is what you want, I will respect it. 7 days starting tomorrow." The shock on her face was instant. She had obviously expected pushback, maybe tears, maybe yelling. My calm answer threw her completely off. She stumbled over her words and asked if I was upset. I just said, "You have made your decision. I am making mine about how I am going to handle it." That night, I took my pillow and slept in the guest room without another word. The next morning, while she was still asleep, I started my plan. First thing, I transferred half of the money in our joint account into my personal account. It was nothing illegal, just me protecting my share during this separation that she was so eager to have. After that, by 9 o'clock in the morning, I had blocked her on every social media platform and changed my relationship status to "It is complicated." My phone blew up almost immediately with messages and notifications from mutual friends, but I ignored every single one. By the time she finally woke up and came downstairs, I was in the living room moving things around. I was boxing up her decorative pillows and framed photos. "What are you doing?" she demanded, standing there in her nightgown. "Respecting your wishes," I said, still working. "You wanted separate lives for a week. That means separate spaces too." While she just stood there, frozen, I kept going. I walked into the main bedroom and started clearing out every trace of her. Her clothes went into suitcases that I carried to the guest room. Her toiletries and makeup came off the bathroom counter and went with her things. Her side of the closet was emptied. I was not yelling, and I was not throwing things. I was calm, focused, and determined. "This is not what I meant," she protested, following me around. "We are supposed to be reflecting on our relationship, not doing all of this." "I am reflecting," I cut in. "And my reflection tells me that when someone asks for space, you give it to them completely. No half measures." By the middle of the day, the shared parts of the house looked very different. The place now showed my style alone. Simple, practical, and clearly masculine. Her plush blankets, scented candles, and artsy photos were all neatly packed into boxes and stacked in the spare room, where she would be staying. "You are taking this too far," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "Am I?" I answered. "You suggested this separation. I am just honoring it properly. 7 days of separate lives means exactly that. You live your life, and I live mine." I then told her that I would be going out that evening with some friends. I made it clear she was not invited. When she started to complain, I reminded her of what she had said. Separate lives, separate activities. Before I left, I handed her a written schedule for using the kitchen and the common areas so that we would not bump into each other too much during this trial separation. On her face, I saw the first real flicker of regret, but I pretended not to notice. "Day 1 of 7, I said as I picked up my keys. "Enjoy your space and your reflection time." "I know I will." When I closed the front door behind me, I caught one last glimpse of her standing alone in what was now basically my living room, surrounded by the results of her own idea. The message could not have been clearer. Be careful what you wish for, because you might get exactly that. I woke up early on the second day of our separate lives experiment, feeling surprisingly rested. The master bedroom, now completely free of her belongings, felt open in a way it never had before. There was a strangely freeing feeling in that emptiness. I picked up my phone and saw 17 missed calls and more than 30 text messages from Jessica. Each message sounded more desperate than the one before it. "Why did you block me on social media? This is not what I meant by separate lives. You are being extreme. Please call me back. Are you trying to scare me?" I read through them with no real emotion, then set my phone down without replying. Actions have consequences. That was a lesson she clearly still needed to learn. After my morning workout and a shower, I made a phone call I had been thinking about since the day before. Within an hour, a professional cleaning crew showed up at the house. When Jessica came out of the guest room in her pajamas and saw 5 people in uniforms walking through the living room and kitchen, her eyes went wide. "What is happening?" she asked, completely blindsided. "Home makeover," I said calmly while I signed the service agreement. "I have always wanted to redecorate, but you always had the final say in how our place looked. Since we are living separate lives this week, I figured this was the perfect time to make some changes." The cleaning crew got to work right away, moving through the house room by room. The flowery curtains Jessica had insisted on were taken down and replaced with simple modern blinds. The light pastel colors on the walls that she had chosen were covered with darker, richer colors that felt strong and masculine to me. The fancy decorative chairs and little tables she had picked out, even when I said I did not like them, were carried out to be put in storage. "You cannot just change everything without asking me," she said, her voice getting louder with every word. I turned toward her and kept my face calm. "Actually, by your own rules, we are living separate lives right now. You said that yourself. During this week, I do not have to check in with you about my personal decisions. This is my side of the separation." She spun around and marched back to the guest room, slamming the door behind her. I went back to directing the crew, telling them exactly how I wanted my home to look and feel. Not her style, not our compromise, just mine. Around midday, I got a text message from her. She wrote that she was leaving work early and coming home so we could properly discuss what was happening. I could feel the panic and regret in every line. I did not answer. Instead, I made my own plans. When she walked in at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, she stopped dead in her tracks. I was sitting in the new version of our living room with an attractive woman from my office. Her name was Vanessa. We had documents spread out on the coffee table and were sitting fairly close as we went through them. "Oh, you are back," I said, like it was nothing. "This is Vanessa from work. She needed help with a project, and since I have this new independent living situation for the week, I invited her over so we could go through it here." The look on Jessica's face was hard to describe. Shock, jealousy, and the slow realization of what her idea of separate lives could really look like. Vanessa, who had no idea what was going on between us, smiled politely and said something about how good the new place looked. She complimented the changes and said the home felt very different in a nice way. "I should go," Jessica muttered, totally thrown off by the scene in front of her. "Do whatever works for you," I replied in a steady, professional tone. "Just remember the schedule I made for the shared areas. It is on the refrigerator." She went back to the guest room, and Vanessa and I kept working for another hour. When Vanessa finally left, I did not go to Jessica to explain anything. I left her alone in her temporary space. This was the reality she had requested. That evening, I decided to order takeout for myself from her favorite restaurant on purpose. When the food arrived, the smell filled the whole apartment. Eventually, she stepped out of the guest room, drawn by the scent, and looked at the food with obvious longing. I sat on the couch, eating calmly and watching a game on the television, which I had moved to a better spot earlier. "We need to talk about what is going on," she said at last, her voice smaller and weaker than I had ever heard it. I glanced up for a second. "This is day 2 of 7, I said. "We can talk on day 8, when your experiment is over. Until then, I am following your separate lives rule exactly like you asked." As she stood there, I could actually see it sinking in. This little trial separation she had started was creating consequences she never imagined. The separate lives she had wanted were starting to feel real, and with every hour that passed, the gap between us felt wider and more solid. "This is not what I wanted," she whispered. "Then you should not have asked for it," I answered, and turned my attention back to the game. At that point, the ball was in her court, but I had completely changed how the game was played. Day 3 of our separation brought some new twists. I woke up to my phone buzzing over and over. This time, it was not Jessica. It was our mutual friends. She had clearly been reaching out to everybody, telling her version of the story. "Man, what is going on?" read one text from my closest friend. "Your wife says you are taking this break thing way too seriously." Another message said, "She is really upset. She says you completely misunderstood what she wanted with this separation week." I smiled to myself when I read them. This was classic damage control. She was already trying to rewrite what had happened, not as her reckless idea to live like strangers for a week, but as me overreacting to some harmless relationship exercise. Instead of replying to each person one by one, I decided on a more careful approach. After I finished my coffee, I walked around the apartment and took several photos. I made sure to capture the new living room, the kitchen, and the master bedroom. I took my time framing each shot so the changes were obvious. Her decorations gone, her soft touches removed, my style clearly in place. Once I had the photos, I made my counter move. I went on to social media and temporarily unblocked Jessica so she would see what I posted. Then I wrote a status update. Sometimes life gives you unexpected chances to grow and to start over. I am choosing to accept change and to rediscover who I am. This week is about a new beginning and a fresh start. I added that I was grateful for the chance to focus on myself, and I mentioned #new beginnings and #fresh start so people would understand the tone I was going for. Then I attached the pictures of the apartment's transformation. In just a few minutes, the post started getting reactions and comments. People from every part of our circle saw it, including her friends, who had definitely already heard her side of the story. Almost right away, my phone rang. It was her mother. I could hear the worry in her voice. "What is happening with you two?" she asked. She called me last night in tears. This was my chance to clarify things. In a calm and steady voice, with no anger at all, I explained exactly what had happened. I told her that Jessica had suggested a 7-day separation to reassess our marriage and our relationship. Those were her exact words, I said. I told her mother, very calmly, "I am simply respecting Jessica's wishes by creating real separation, just like she asked for. If she is upset about the fallout from her own idea, that is something she needs to think about." The quiet on the other end of the line said a lot. Her mom, who has always been pretty practical, finally asked, "Was this separation really her idea? She told me you both decided this together. I still have the text messages if you want me to send them." "This was completely her idea," I answered in an even tone. By the middle of the day, I was hearing from mutual friends that Jessica had left work early because she was too upset to focus. The little story she had been telling people was starting to fall apart as the real version made its way through our friend group. The villain role she tried to pin on me was backfiring badly. When she came home that afternoon, her whole attitude had changed. The anger from the day before was gone. Instead, she looked smaller somehow, almost apologetic. "Can we please talk?" she asked, standing in the doorway of what was now clearly my living room. I looked up from my laptop. "The schedule says this is my time for the shared areas," I told her. "Your turn starts at 7 o'clock in the evening." "This is ridiculous," she said, but without the fire she used to have. "Everyone thinks we are getting divorced because of your social media posts." "I just shared my experience of the separate lives that you requested," I replied. "Would you rather I lie about what is happening?" She closed her eyes and took a breath. "My friends were just suggesting this as a way for us to appreciate each other more. Not whatever this has turned into." I shut my laptop slowly and looked at her. "It is interesting," I said, "that all these friends giving you relationship advice are recently divorced. Maybe they are not the best people to listen to about how to handle a marriage." That hit her hard. I could see it in her face as it dawned on her how easily she had let herself be guided by people whose own marriages had fallen apart. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "Can we just end this experiment now?" I held her gaze and did not back down. "This is day 3 of 7, I said. "We agreed to this process. Ending it early would go against the whole point of your reflection exercise, would it not?" She looked frustrated, like she was stuck in a trap she built herself. She was finally feeling the full weight of the choice she made so casually. "Your time to use the kitchen for dinner starts in 3 hours, I reminded her. "Until then, I will be in there getting meals ready for tomorrow." She turned and went back to the guest room. Not long after that, I got another message, this time from her sister. What exactly did she ask for? "She is completely falling apart." I answered by sending a screenshot of Jessica's original text where she had laid out the 7-day separation idea. I did not add a single word. The truth did all the talking. By that evening, the power balance between us had changed completely. What started as her little test of our relationship had turned into a very real lesson about respect, commitment, and consequences. 3 days in, the experiment was producing results, just not the ones she expected when she casually suggested putting our marriage on pause for a week of personal space. The morning of day 4 marked the halfway point of this whole separate lives project. I was at my desk in the master bedroom, going through some work documents, when I heard a soft knock on the door. She was standing there with a tray in her hands. On it was my favorite breakfast and a cup of coffee made exactly how I like it. "I thought we could have breakfast together," she said quietly. Her eyes were tired, and she looked like she had not slept much. The woman who was always put together now looked worn out and a little messy. I looked at the tray and at her, but I kept my face blank. I knew exactly what this was. Classic peace-offering behavior. Food, care, trying to rebuild a bridge. On any normal day, I might have been grateful. But this was no longer about a nice breakfast. This was about respect. "Thank you for the effort," I said in a calm voice. "But I already ate. And according to our schedule, this is still my private time." Her face fell. All that work she had put into the meal suddenly meant nothing. "Can we please talk?" she asked. "Really talk? I think this has gone far enough." I thought it over for a moment. "We can talk," I said, "but not about ending this experiment early. That part is not up for negotiation." Relief washed over her face anyway. She took that as an opening, set the tray down on the dresser, and sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed on my feet, keeping some distance between us, both emotionally and physically. "I made a terrible mistake," she started, her voice shaking a little. "The girls at my office, they are all going through divorces. They keep talking about how their marriages fell apart because they lost themselves. They convinced me we needed this separation test to make our relationship stronger." I listened to her without saying a word, just taking in every excuse and every time she pushed the blame onto other people. When she finally went quiet, I waited a beat and then answered her very carefully. "That is interesting," I said, "because I had a pretty important conversation yesterday too." I let the silence hang there for a second. "With a divorce attorney." The color drained out of her face. "What? Why would you do that?" "To understand my options," I said calmly, cutting off whatever else she was about to say. "You might have treated this separation like some kind of little test, but for me it has turned into something a lot bigger. It has shown me some serious problems with respect and commitment in our marriage." "It was just a stupid suggestion," she said quickly. "I never meant." "Intent does not erase impact," I said, my voice firm. "When you lightly suggested tearing our life apart for a week, you showed me how easily you are willing to put our marriage on the table. That is not something I can just pretend never happened when your experiment is over." Tears started to fill her eyes. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" "I am saying I am evaluating what I want," I answered. "Which is exactly what you said you needed this separation for. The difference is, I am not treating it like a game." She reached out to take my hand, but I moved it just enough so that her fingers brushed air instead of my skin. The attorney explained some things about how these so-called experimental separations can look in court. I continued. "In some cases, they can be used as proof that the marriage is already breaking down." That hit her hard. What she had written off as a harmless week-long exercise suddenly looked a lot less harmless. "This was never about breaking up," she said in a desperate whisper. "Then what was it about?" I asked. "Seeing how much I would tolerate? Checking if I would beg you to stay? Testing what kind of emotional pressure works best on me?" My voice stayed steady, but I knew my words were landing like a scalpel. She did not answer. She did not have to. The real nature of her little experiment, whether she had admitted it to herself or not, was now right out in the open. "The attorney is sending me some paperwork later today," I went on. "Not divorce papers. A post-nuptial agreement that will protect both of us if you ever decide you need to reassess our relationship again in the future." "A post-nuptial agreement?" she repeated, shocked. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious," I said. "If this marriage continues after this week, it is going to be with clear rules and real consequences for crossing them." I stood up and checked my watch on purpose. "I have a video meeting in 10 minutes. Your turn in the shared space starts at noon." She picked up the untouched breakfast tray with shaking hands. As she turned to go, I added one more thing. "By the way, I canceled our joint credit cards for the rest of the separation. Since we are living separate lives, I thought our money should be separate too. I left some cash on the counter for your expenses." She just stood there for a moment, frozen, the full weight of everything finally dropping on her. This was no longer just about moving furniture around or blocking each other online. This was about the basic trust and structure of our marriage being taken apart piece by piece. All because of that one casual suggestion to live separately for a week. Day 4 of 7. I reminded her as I turned back to my laptop. We are only halfway through your experiment. After she left the room, I could hear soft crying coming from the guest room. I did not feel happy about it, but I did feel justified. Sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped inside pain. And she was learning, day by day, what she was really risking with the way she had treated our marriage. Day 5 of our separation started in a strange kind of quiet. When I woke up, she was already gone. There were none of the usual sounds of her morning routine. No hairdryer, no makeup drawers, no clinking dishes. On the kitchen counter, there was a short note. Taking a personal day. I need time to think. I read it once, set it back down, and went on with my morning. I got dressed, grabbed my things, and headed to work with a calm, controlled mindset. The email from the attorney had arrived, just like he said it would. The post-nuptial agreement was attached, written in careful legal terms, laying out exactly what would happen with money, property, and separation if things ever went bad again. I forwarded it to her work email with a simple subject line, "For your review." Day 5. During lunch, my team leader looked at me and said, "You seem different. More focused. More decided." "Just getting clear on a few personal things," I replied. And as I said it, I realized it was true. This whole situation had brought clarity, not just about whether I wanted to stay married, but about the kind of marriage I would or would not live with. I went home earlier than I usually did, thinking I would have the quiet apartment to myself to finish some projects. But as I got closer to the door, I heard it, keys rattling fast and hard against the lock. Then came the thud of a fist on the door. "Open the door," she yelled, her voice sharp with panic and anger. The sound echoed down the hallway. I walked down the hall calmly and saw her struggling with the lock. When she heard my footsteps, she spun around. Her hair was messed up, her eyes were puffy and red, like she had been crying for hours. "My key does not work," she said, accusing me with her tone as she held up her key ring. "I had the locks changed yesterday afternoon," I answered in a flat, matter-of-fact way. "Separate lives, separate security. I left a message with your sister about it." "You changed the locks on our apartment?" she shouted, disbelief rising in her voice. She yelled, "You cannot just lock me out of my own home." I raised an eyebrow. "Is it really your home this week? By your rules, we are living separate lives. I am just setting the boundaries to match that." A couple of neighbors cracked their doors open at the noise, pretending not to stare. She noticed them right away and dropped her voice. "Please let me in," she said. "We need to talk." I unlocked the door and stepped aside. She rushed past me into the apartment, and for a second her perfume hit me. It was a familiar scent, tied to a lot of good memories. For just a moment, I felt the weight of everything we were putting on the line. Then I remembered how easily she had tossed our life onto the table as something to experiment with. Inside, she turned to face me. The calm front she had been trying to hold on to finally broke. "The post-nuptial agreement," she said, almost spitting the words out. "Really? You are going to punish me legally for one stupid suggestion?" "It is not punishment," I corrected her. "It is protection. For both of us." "This has gone too far," she insisted, waving her hand toward the apartment, toward the new furniture, the paint, the boxes, all of it. "I have learned my lesson. I know I messed up. I should never have listened to my divorced friends. I never should have suggested this separation. Can we please just stop this now?" I studied her carefully. Her eyes were full of fear, her hands were shaking. This was not some act to win a fight. She was honestly scared of losing everything. "We can talk about ending the experiment," I said at last. "But not without conditions." Hope flickered across her face. "Anything," she said quickly. "Just tell me what to do." "First," I said, "you signed the post-nuptial agreement. It clearly says that if either one of us ever pushes for a separation without both of us agreeing to it, there will be financial consequences. No more casual tests with our marriage on the line." She swallowed hard, but nodded. "Second," I went on, "we start couples therapy. Not advice from coworkers, not online articles, not friends at happy hour. A real, licensed professional, and we stick with it." She nodded again, this time even faster. "Third," I said, holding her gaze, "you tell the truth to every person you dragged into this story. You tell them this whole separation idea was yours. You tell them it backfired. You tell them you regret it. No more twisting the story to make me the bad guy." That one hurt. I could see it in her eyes. Admitting that out loud would sting her pride. After a moment, though, she nodded slowly. And finally, I said, stepping a little closer but still keeping my distance, you understand that trust has been damaged. Not destroyed beyond repair, but seriously cracked. Fixing it is going to take time and steady effort from you. Not just words. Actions. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I never meant to hurt us like this, she whispered. Intent does not change impact. I reminded her, repeating what I had said before. You treated the foundation of our marriage like something you could test for a week. That choice has consequences. She moved toward me with her arms open, reaching for a hug. I stepped back just enough that it was clear I was not ready for that yet, but I did not completely shut her out. The experiment continues until every condition is met, I said. The locks stay the way they are. The schedule for the shared room stays in place. You keep staying in the guest room. When the post-nuptial is signed and the other steps are in motion, then we can talk about ending this early. Disappointment showed plain on her face, but she did not argue. She understood now that the balance had changed. Before, she had felt comfortable testing me, testing us. Now she understood that being close to me, being part of my life, was not something she could gamble with and expect no cost. I will sign it tonight, she said quietly, and I will call a therapist tomorrow morning. I nodded and glanced at the clock. According to our schedule, the shared areas belong to you for the next 2 hours, I said. I will be in my office. I turned to go down the hall, and she called after me. Do you still love me? I stopped at the doorway and thought about my answer. Love was never the problem, I said. Respect is what slipped. And that is what we are working on rebuilding. Day 5 ended with her sitting alone at the kitchen table, reading every line of the post-nuptial agreement, while I worked in my separate space. The distance between us was no longer just about bedrooms and schedules. It was emotional, and now it was written out in legal terms as well. All of it started with her saying we needed space to appreciate each other more. The last 2 days of our separate lives experiment unfolded with the roles almost completely reversed. She had gone from confidently pushing for this idea to moving through the apartment with careful, almost nervous steps. She checked the schedule before entering a room. She respected the time blocks. She was very aware of the boundaries now. On the morning of day 6, I walked into my office and saw the signed post-nuptial agreement on my desk. Her name was there in fresh ink. Next to it was a printed copy of an email confirming our first couples therapy appointment for the following week. She was working through the conditions one after another, just like I had laid them out. Later that day, while I was at my desk, I heard her talking on the phone in the next room. The door was slightly open, and her voice carried clearly. No, you do not understand, she was saying to her closest friend. This was completely my fault. I am the one who suggested this stupid separation idea. I listened to everybody except my husband, and he called my bluff in a way I never saw coming. There was a pause while her friend responded. Then Jessica spoke again, her voice tight but steady. No, he is not being cruel, she said. I heard her take a shaky breath on the phone. He is showing me exactly what I asked for, she said. He is showing me what life would really be like if we separated. And it is nothing like that empowering experience everyone kept talking about. There was another pause while her friend talked. The truth is, Jessica went on, I almost destroyed my marriage because I was bored and I listened to divorced friends who pushed their own failures onto my relationship. I am lucky he is even willing to try to rebuild this with me. I stepped over and gently closed my office door, giving her some privacy. She was not just performing for an audience. She was owning what she did. That honesty, especially with other people listening, was the first real step toward rebuilding trust. That evening, for the first time since this whole thing started, we shared the common area at the same time. We still kept a little space between us, but the tension felt different. Softer. She had made dinner and quietly set my plate at my usual spot, then sat at the far end of the table with hers. I have been thinking about what you said, she began, choosing her words carefully. About respect being the real issue. You were right. I gave a small nod and kept eating, waiting to hear the rest. When I suggested this separation, I did not really think about what it meant, she said. I treated our marriage like something you can pause and then just start back up again whenever you feel like it. She set her fork down and looked straight at me. That was deeply disrespectful to you and to what we promised each other. Yes, I said simply. It was. She flinched a little at how direct I was, but I did not soften it. Commitment is not conditional, I added. It is not a trial run. It is a decision you make every single day, especially when things are hard. I understand that now, she said quietly. The question is, do you think I can earn that trust back? I thought about my answer before I gave it. Trust does not come back because someone says the right words, I said. It comes back when they show up the right way, over and over, for a long time. That is how it is rebuilt. The seventh and final day of the experiment came with a noticeable change in how the apartment felt. The hard lines of the separation had softened, not because I relaxed them, but because she had been taking my conditions seriously and following them. That morning, there was a soft knock at my bedroom door. She did not just walk in like she used to. She waited. When I opened the door, she was standing there holding a small gift bag. It is not a bribe, she said quickly. It is just something I want you to have. Inside was a new set of keys. One to the apartment, one to her car, and one key I did not recognize. The third one is for a safety deposit box, she explained. I put copies of our important documents in there. The post-nuptial agreement is in there too. It is my way of showing that I accept the boundaries we have set and that I am committed to them. I took a moment to let that sink in. She was not trying to win me over with flowers or some dramatic speech. She was showing, in a very practical way, that she understood this was serious, that our security and our rules mattered. Thank you, I said, and this time the appreciation in my voice was real and clear. As the day went on, we moved through the last hours of our official separation. The same schedule that had felt cold and rigid at first now felt more like a framework we had both learned to respect. Her casual little experiment had ended up rewriting the power dynamic in our relationship. That evening, we sat in the living room. The schedule was done. The 7 days were officially over. The experiment ends tonight, I said, setting my glass down on the table. What did you learn from it? She took a slow breath. I learned that I took our marriage for granted, she said. That I let other people's opinions matter more than yours. That what I thought would help me find myself almost cost me everything that actually mattered. I nodded, letting her continue. But more than that, she added, I learned that you will not put up with disrespect or manipulation. That your commitment deserves mine at the same level. And that when I cross a boundary, there are real consequences. Not just hurt feelings. Real ones. Her words hung in the air between us. This week had been a test, all right. Not the cute, controlled little test she had imagined, but maybe the kind of test our marriage actually needed. So, she asked softly, what happens now? Now, I said, choosing each word, we start rebuilding. With new rules. With clear boundaries. And with respect going both ways. The guest room stays yours until I feel that the trust is strong again. She accepted that without complaining. Another sign things had changed. The old version of her would have pushed, argued, tried to speed everything up. Now she understood that healing was going to happen on my timeline, not just hers. I am willing to earn back my place in this marriage, she said, and there was a new kind of strength in her voice. However long it takes. When the clock hit midnight, our 7-day experiment was officially done, but it did not feel like we were going back to how things were. It felt like we were standing at the start of something completely new. Her suggestion, meant to reassess our marriage, had done exactly that, but not in the way she had pictured. She had wanted distance to see if she really valued what we had. Instead, she saw clearly how close she came to losing it. And I realized I did not have to accept being tested like that ever again. Day 7 is complete, I said, standing up to head to my room. Now the real work starts. The experiment was over. Its impact was not. In trying to test our relationship, she had changed it permanently. And with some effort and a lot of honesty, maybe those changes would turn out to be for the better.